Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Low Season Traveller Insider Guides. I'm Jed Brown, founder of Low Season Traveller, and this week we head across the Irish Sea to Dublin. Now, Dublin has seen many changes over recent years, and it receives more visitors than ever before. So I wanted to find out if you can still find the traditional old Dublin during the low season months of autumn and winter, and find out what travellers may be missing out on if they visit Dublin and just stick to the same old itineraries. To help us learn more, I caught up with Garvan Rushe, who is a professional tour guide and is also the managing director of DublinTourGuide.ie. Enjoy. So a very good morning to you, Garvan, and welcome to the Low Season Travel Podcast. How are you?
I'm great, Jed. How are you doing?
I'm very well indeed. Thank you very much. I'm sat here in my soundproof booth in a decidedly autumnal Manchester day. How's the weather where you are? You're in Dublin, I guess.
Yes, it's about the same. Well, to be honest, a lot of the time Ireland just has autumnal weather.
Yeah,
it depends on which way you phrase it. If you want to say it's autumnal or it's spring weather, which both sound very positive, unless it's July.
Very good. Put a good spin on it. So listen, I guess let's start straight off with you're the managing director of Dublin Tour Guide, which does private walking tours of Dublin. And you've been a Dublin tour guide for many years now. So talk us through how and why, I guess, did you get into tour guiding?
Well, I suppose it goes back to university. Thanks to the Irish government, the Irish Education Act of 1996, since then every Irish citizen has been permitted to go to university for free, at least as far as a bachelor. For free. So I went to my parents and I said, I want to study philosophy. My dad went, oh, okay. And I want to do medieval Irish and Celtic studies. I said, okay. Oh, that sounds interesting. Have you told your mother? So this is basically how university started. With me deciding on subjects that I found interesting, and they became even more interesting as I got into them. So medieval Irish and Celtic studies was where I learned a lot of the Irish history that we don't learn in school. It's the golden days. It's the days before the English come and things get a bit changed, let's put it nicely, right? So it's Ireland before the 12th century. And I tell this to people, to tourists, and they say, oh, that's very kind of esoteric, before the 12th century. And I say, well, if you think about it, that's most of Irish history.
Yeah.
Most of Irish history is before the 12th century. Anyway, I studied this and I learned a lot of history and a lot of cultural history that changed Ireland, and I saw how that happened. So that was one aspect of my formation in becoming a tour guide. Another aspect of it, also in university, was the social end of university. So going to parties. So I learned that the international students had fantastic parties. So I ended up being the only Irish person at the international parties.
Tremendous.
And I would get all these questions, right? All these questions about why do Irish people do this, right? And why is this like this here in Ireland? And it's like asking a fish, what does water feel like? You have no idea that things could be any different. So with the historical background through Celtic studies, I also complemented that with my own research into Irish society. So just kind of sociological studies. So a lot of books, a lot of research to kind of find out the answers, either explicitly or figure them out myself, So with that, I was like, I've got to tell people about this. So becoming a tour guide seemed the most, I won't say the most obvious choice, because the most obvious choice for graduates of philosophy and Celtic studies is lamentably, oh, you should become a professor.
Yeah.
Just a very, here's your job opportunities. I'll count them on one hand. So I figured out the tour guide would be a great job. So I started tour guiding in August 2009, so just before I graduated. And I can't believe it. It's been over 10 years now at this stage, and still love it. It's great. It's the best job in the world.
Fantastic. And I guess so. You've been doing it for 10 years. In the 10 years that you've been tour guiding in Dublin, what kind of changes have you noticed in Dublin, and maybe in the visitors that you're getting to Dublin?
Well, in when I started, it was the recession, right? I mean, we came into the recession at the end of 2007, 2008, and I started in 2009, so the recession was in full swing. And what Ireland was encountering socially was quite interesting, because we had recessions. In fact, you could say that looking at Ireland over the last 200 years, there was one big recession, and then there was a short break at the end of the 90s. That was it, the Celtic Tiger from 1996 to 2007. And then the recession hit, and it hit us hard because we had got carried away, and we'd taken the good times for granted. And so there were things like marches and protests about austerity measures. There was a march for water, so the water charge is going to be introduced, and the people stood up and actually prevented the government from introducing them, and having the government to recant and go back on the changes that they made. So that was an incredibly blatant show of the tenacity of Irish people. Mm-hmm. And this is one thing that Irish people seem to forget, that the spirit of community and society in Ireland has been resistant to British control, power, oppression for over 7 centuries. And you don't forget that. That becomes a part of your heart, your blood, your soul. Yeah. So it was great to see that still change. Now physically, in 2013, we had a new Lewis line. The Lewis is the tram. So that's what we call the tram. It's called the Lewis or the Daniel Day.
Daniel Day.
Daniel Day Lewis.
Okay, got it.
So that opened in 2013, and that finally connected the city in terms of the tramway system. So that's made it easier to get around for sure. We, during the recession, at the end of the recession, encountered a housing crisis. So there was a lack of building that was done during the recession, which was quite tragically ironic, given the fact that the whole recession itself was a cause of the building boom that we had. So we had a lack of houses, apartments to buy and to rent. We had a lack of hotel rooms. We had a lack of social housing, a lack of emergency accommodation, and even a lack of hospital beds. So that was a big problem. That still is a big problem, though in the last 2 years, the government have stepped up their game and addressed it. And thankfully, we've built a lot of hotels as well. So that's very beneficial. One thing that's changed, because we were speaking just before we started recording here about a great pub that you were in when you were living in Dublin that no longer exists. And that area is called the Liberties. And the Liberties would have been, and now it's a neighborhood in the city center of Dublin. It's just west of St. Patrick's and Christchurch Cathedral. You walk west for 5 minutes and you're in the Liberties. But it's a neighborhood that was kind of trapped in the 90s, in a good way and a bad way. Mm-hmm. And it has seen over the last few years a recent resurgence. So there's been an investment through the county council, through I'm sure Guinness as well, because they're in that area, and just local businesses starting up in the Liberties. It's become revived. It's now a very interesting place to walk through, rather than a dodgy place like it used to be maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. Also changes that Dublin has seen have been the food choices. So I don't know what it was like back in the 90s, but if you came to Ireland in the 1970s, you could eat at an Irish pub, number one. If you were celebrating a birthday or you were doing something fancy, go out to a restaurant, which would be Italian, and then we would have a Chinese takeaway. Those were the three food options, basically. But thanks to the Celtic Tiger, thanks to the economic boom, immigrants started coming into the country. Dublin became more cosmopolitan, which is very interesting because it was just starting when you were here. You were here at the end of the 90s.
Right?
So at that stage, there may have been some immigrants coming in. But really, it all kicked up in 2004 when 10 countries joined the EU, mainly from Eastern Europe. And that brought in a lot of different cultures and a lot of different tastes and flavors as well. So thankfully, the food choices are great here in Dublin. We had a whole, we had these trends.
Yeah.
So in 2010, we had a load of burrito places open up, just burritos everywhere. And then kind of from 2013, there was barbecue places. I don't know about yourselves in the UK, but in Ireland, when you said barbecue to an Irish person, they would assume that's a type of sauce, right? It's like barbecue. Oh, that's what they do in the TV. That's what optimistic people in Ireland and Britain attempt to do in the months of May to September to, try to have a summer, quotation marks, right? So proper barbecue places. And then, 2015, a lot of donut places opened up. And then, thankfully, more recently, more salads and healthy eating options. So that's been a good one. And of course, more and more pubs, you got craft beer pubs coming up as well. You still have your old traditional pubs. You've got, interestingly, just recently, a pub with no beer.
A pub with no beer in Dublin.
A pub with no beer. What a terrible thing is a pub with no beer. So the Virgin Mary Bar is a bar for teetotalers, for people that want to go out and socialize, but don't want to suffer the be compelled to have a drink. Which, as you can remember, and it's still true today, Irish social life is centered around the pub. And that's a good thing and it's a bad thing, so it's good to have those options there. So those are kind of be the main changes that have happened in Dublin since I started.
So obviously, Dublin has, in the past 20 years, it's become more of a, cosmopolitan, European city like many other major European capital cities. Is it still possible to find, traditional old Dublin? And well, I suppose what is traditional old Dublin? What were the old times like? And is that still in any way, shape, or form preserved in any pockets in present day Dublin?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the worry with modernization and money. The more of those two elements you bring in, the more things change and how a city sort of loses its way and loses its roots. But that's not going to happen in Dublin. That doesn't happen here in Ireland. People are still very cultured and aware of their culture. It gives you a sense of grounding. And particularly because the Irish are quite a nomadic tribe, right? We tend to get everywhere. Right? There's 70 million of us around the world, and there's 4 of us left here in Ireland. Yeah. Me and 3 other fellas.
Yeah.
But people come home, right? So you have a lot of people coming home from visiting Australia or living in Australia for 4 years, or going to Canada or the States or Britain, right? Their Irishness is accentuated when they go abroad, and when they come back, they feel a need to reconnect with that. So you can imagine this is happening on a huge scale, right? So there is for sure still that desire and that action of refocusing on our culture. Now, in terms of walking around Dublin, sure, you will see Starbucks and things like that. and that is lamentable.
Yeah.
But things like that happen. But thankfully, there's still these small coffee shops. Dublin doesn't really need places like Starbucks, because you can get a fantastic almond milk cappuccino everywhere. And as I said, with a lot of people coming back from Australia, there's a lot of flat whites going around as well, right? So you have that. You have the streets are changing, but changing slightly. The pubs are still there, and people still want those old man pubs. Some areas, some neighborhoods that have been redeveloped, as I said, like the Liberties, or where I live, Smithfield, there's more interest in developing it in the right way, so it doesn't go crazy. Gentrification happens, but at a more stable, slower pace, rather than San Francisco or Austin. Things don't change completely. Liberties is the best neighborhood in Dublin. You walk in there, and if you spend any time in the Liberties, you'll notice that everyone walking around knows each other. They're all residents who live there. They shop locally, and the main street of the area is Meath Street, and it looks like the main street of an Irish town in the 90s. In all the good ways, basically what I'm saying. So you have that sealed away, and it's a short walk from the city centre. Now, the city centre of Dublin is remarkably small. You could walk from St. Patrick's Cathedral in the southwest all the way up to the top of Parnell Square in 20 minutes, right? That's the diameter of the city, at least as far as tour guides are concerned, because that's the area that we cover when we're walking. And Liberties is just to the west of that, that old spirit of Dublin is there on Grafton Street with the flower ladies. It's interesting bringing people to Grafton Street, because if you just pop on the street and look around and look at the things that the businesses want you to look at, right, that are trying to attract your attention, you see the brands, right? It's a high street. It's just like any high street in Ireland and Britain. But what you don't notice, or you're not that quick to notice, is these flower ladies, right? Are the buskers, right? These street performers. And you got to realize that they were there 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Every street in Dublin would have had street vendors, street sellers, and people singing for their supper.
Yeah.
Now, back in the 90s, you would have gotten more people reciting poems and singing a cappella. Unfortunately, we have few of those now, which is a pity, because I would have liked more of them. But you still have, thankfully, a great variety of street performers. Got a great classical acoustic guitarist on Grafton Street. He's wonderful. And then you've got a whole mix of different artists on the street, and some of them not so artistic, let's say. But that, for me, Grafton Street is the last bastion, right? A last bulwark against the modern world, right? This is an example of the way Dublin used to be 100 years ago, right? Yeah. You can see this everywhere. So for sure, you can still find the spirit of Dublin there everywhere, basically.
Love that. One thing that I wanted to talk about as well, before we sort of move on to some of the kind of tours and the itineraries that you do, I was looking at the Dublin tourism stats. I was looking at this incredible growth. There's been huge growth, obviously, at the airport. There's a new terminal there. There's more flights into Dublin and out of Dublin, I guess, than ever before. And according to Bord Fáilte, or
there you go,
it was saying that there was just under 11 million visitors to the island of Ireland last year, and I think the figure was about 6 million for Dublin. Does that sound about right?
Well, it's difficult to gauge. The main thing you can look at is the airport. Obviously, people come here from Britain by sea as well, so those figures have to be considered, because those people tend to stay much longer and are, let's say, would they get a better Irish experience because they stay for a week or 2 or 3 or whatever. But in 2018, supposedly there were 31.5 million passengers going through Dublin Airport.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So that's remarkable. So let's say you could split that and say half of those are coming into Ireland. And with the Republic of Ireland's population is 4.75 million, right? So many times the population of the country. And going to Dublin Airport, you can just see, where they're coming from. They're not all coming from just Europe, it's a global hub now.
Yeah.
And that's really a key to our success as far as tourism is concerned, because Ireland, and to a lesser extent Britain, suffer from our geographic isolation, right? We're islands. You can't drive to Ireland. You can take the train from Paris to London, and take the train from London to Dublin, unfortunately. So the airport has been a big key to our success there.
And in terms of the so in terms of the passenger numbers, obviously there's more tourists than ever before in Dublin. Does Dublin, let's move on to the seasons now. Does Dublin, in tourism terms, does it have busier periods and quieter periods? And what's the difference from a tourism perspective during those quieter periods, what we're calling the low seasons? So when are the low seasons, and how does the experience differ for the tourists that visit Dublin during those low seasons?
Well, you could say the low season is the low season would be from September to May, but depending on where you are in tourism, it might be October to April.
Yeah.
But generally, let's say September to May. In Dublin, it kind of stretches. So a lot of the tourism industries or businesses in Dublin would extend and say it's October to April, really, with a slight bump around St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
Right. But coming to Dublin in the low season, it's just fantastic, because you're going to places like Trinity College, right? And you go into this beautiful campus. It dates back to the 17th century, but most of the buildings there that you'll see are from the 1700s, right? Kind of Dublin's golden age. And it's the last place in Dublin that actually has real cobblestones, as opposed to cut-out sets, as they're called. Furthermore, it's not just stone cobblestones, but at the entrances, there are these wonderful hexagonal wooden cobblestones, you could call them. So these wooden tiles, just a great entrance. And it's impossible, or rather very difficult, to notice that if you're busy making sure you're not bumping into anybody. And that's what happens at the main entrance, because there's a bottleneck there. The great thing about that entrance is that only kind of one person can go by at a time, so you can't have two people going either way. And this makes the campus more of an isolated campus, separate from the bustling city. So as soon as you pass through that old wooden door, you're into the campus. Now, you can't get that experience in the summer months, because it's as noisy inside the campus as it is outside. But in the low months, you can come in and you can feel the sense of calm. And moreover, during the low months, there's actually students there at the university. University with students. Whereas in the summer months, it feels like a museum, because 95% of the people there are tourists, and the other 5% are tour guides. People working there. So, Trinity is a great place to visit during the low season.
So you get more local interaction, I guess, because there's fewer tourists around. There's more of a chance of interactions with the local Dubs.
For sure. for sure, yeah. And on that point, if you want to actually meet locals, interact with them, you're going to be staying out of the touristy areas like the Temple Bar area. And that's, if you take away nothing else from this podcast episode, take away the advice that you don't need to go to Temple Bar to go to Irish pubs. We have them everywhere, right? They're littered all over the place. So just remember, if you want to meet a local, outside Temple Bar is where you go. But just, in the low season, we've got October right now. And October is a fantastic month to be in Ireland because, October is, definitely summer has ended. Summer is gone, right? October, winter is set to come. So you've got the fear of winter coming. Winter is coming. And you've got Halloween coming up. So Halloween, obviously, in the modern context, is an Irish-American event that was resurrected by the Irish Americans because it's actually, in essence, an old Celtic pagan festival. Mm-hmm. So the Irish pagan festival of Samhain, and it's the Celtic New Year. So it would have been the most important event on the calendar, at least the biggest festival. So lighting bonfires and doing things like that, less so the modern Halloween things, but some of them are still there. So Halloween is brought to mind, and it's just great to look at the grey stone of Gothic churches and cathedrals in that early darkness, and furthermore to see it painted black with rain. Every time I look at Christchurch Cathedral in the evening covered in rain, I just think of Bram Stoker.
Yeah.
Who was Bram Stoker? Do you know?
The writer of Dracula?
We got somebody.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah. He wrote Dracula.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So Bram Stoker, author of Dracula, supposedly modeled his idea of Dracula's London mansion on Christchurch Cathedral.
Oh, really?
And Christchurch is arguably the most beautiful structure in Dublin. It's just a wonderful Gothic cathedral. It's fantastic. And over the last few years, there's been the development of a Bram Stoker festival, kind of the week leading up to October 31st.
Yeah.
So that's great because you can go to the house where he was born, and there's a lot of other spooky events happening. So coming to Ireland at this time is fantastic. And if you go to the countryside and actually experience a bonfire on October 31st, or go to one of the ancient hills where they're having a neo-pagan festival, it's a wonderful experience. So that's October, and then December. December's great because Grafton Street is lit up with so many lights, and Dubliners and their families make an event of coming in and seeing the lights being turned on Grafton Street. So expats get a great warm fuzzy feeling when they come back for Christmas and they see those lights on Grafton Street. It's also, can be a bit nippy, so it's a great excuse to go and have a hot whiskey. Right, lovely whiskey with you've got a slice of lemon there, cloves, ideally honey, a shot of whiskey, and some hot water. And the key is to obviously drink it hot to warm you up. That's lovely, and I don't know about yourself, but I love Glühwein, mulled wine.
Yeah.
And I have some Austrian friends who I introduced to hot whiskey, and they said it was even better than Glühwein.
There we go.
And that might have to do with the fact that I put more whiskey in it.
Tell me this, on the run up to Christmas. My mother is from the country, shall we say? She's from Carlow,
Great.
in towards the Midlands. And she was always saying this, in days gone by, there was a specified day. I don't know when it is or was in December, when everybody from the country would come to Dublin to do their Christmas shopping.
Yes.
Is that a tradition that still exists? Does that still happen?
Well, obviously it depends on what part of the country you're from.
Right.
Because it's much easier to get to Dublin from Carlow than it is to get to Dublin from where I'm from, Donegal.
Yep.
And the closest big city to where I'm from is Derry, and then the next one over is Belfast. But yes, you Dublin is by far the biggest city in the Republic of Ireland, and so has the best shopping options. And coming into Dublin for people down the country throughout, the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, that was the thing to do. You'd go into Dublin because that's where you'd actually get the brands, right? Yeah. That's where you'd get real shopping. Whereas if you're in Carlow, there wouldn't be much to buy in Carlow now.
There probably still isn't, I would imagine. But let's move on then to the kind of tours that you do. Give us an idea of the kind of stuff that you include on the itinerary of your private walking tours around Dublin. What kind of stuff can our listeners expect to see and experience when they're with you on one of your tours?
Well, experience is the key word. I mean, we have obviously tour descriptions complete with the itinerary of what we're going to see, but Dublin is a platform on which I explain Irish history and Irish culture. Mm-hmm. All of it together gives you a true sense of what it means to live in Dublin, what it means to be Irish, and what Dublin means. Because if you do a tour of a city and you just talk about the buildings, it's like giving a tour of ruins, mm-hmm. unless you talk about how the locals, how the people interact with those buildings. That's what makes it a city, a living city. Even though the buildings may somewhat weather, what changes more about them is how people regard them, how that changes. So one of the sites that I love and the rest of the guides love visiting during our tours is the post office, mm-hmm. which, unless you're familiar with Irish history, sounds like a ridiculous thing to visit. Why would you go to the post office? But it's the general post office, it's the GPO, and it is where the Proclamation of Irish Independence was read out on Easter Monday, 1916. So going there, thankfully, at any time of the year, is actually a great experience because so few tourists know about it. It's such a contradiction to say that the post office is the most important historical building in Dublin, yet it's off the beaten track, right? Off the beaten path. We go in there, and the groups that we have, we do small private tours because your experience as a visitor is determined by how well you connect with the city, and that connection is facilitated by the guide. So we don't like doing tours where there's 30 people because it's less of a deep experience for each of those 30 people, because I'm only looking at each one of them every so often. Whereas if I have 3 people, I'm actually chatting to them rather than at them. So that's the big difference on our tours. But the post office, it's great to be there because you're inside the post office and there's no other groups in there. There's people using the post office facilities, right?
Sending parcels and
they're still doing that stuff. Yep. And you're standing there at a beautiful building and you realize that standing here on the post office ground is like an American actually standing on one of the boats where the Boston Tea Party took place. The actual boat, not the replica, the actual boat. So to be an Irish person and to stand there and to contemplate all that happened there with those brave, and some would say foolish, men and women who took a chance. And without that chance, without their actions, Ireland politically wouldn't be where it is today. We wouldn't have got freedom, right? So that's a wonderful visit that I think the post office is not known about, which is very sad. Now the post office, as I said, it's a post office. It doesn't advertise the fact that it's a super important historical building because every Irish person knows it, and it's great to be a local and just walk past the building. Now it's on O'Connell Street, the main street, so you're going to walk past it, and to imagine that every person that walks past that, whether they consciously acknowledge the post office or not, they feel the significance of this building. And you can imagine fathers bringing their sons and telling them about the post office with pride. And that is what most tourists miss. They miss this incredibly important historical building. So we go there, needless to say. We go to the post office, we go to Trinity College, we check out the old Parliament building that the British built in the 1700s. Most of the architecture in Dublin that's pretty was built by the British, and most of the stuff that's not so pretty was built by the Irish, because it was built mainly in the 20th century, right? And 18th century, better than 20th century, at least the 1960s and 70s. I don't know what we were doing there. Anyway, post office, Trinity College, old Parliament building, the current Parliament building as well, the actual Irish Parliament building, St. Stephen's Green, which is the central park of Dublin. It's probably the most beloved part of the city for Dubliners. Right? Beautiful park, perfect size. It's not too big, it's just Goldilocks park. You've got, of course, Grafton Street, which I spoke about earlier. You have the wonderful boutique shopping area west of Grafton Street, where you'll actually find some individual shops, right? Some standalone boutiques, as opposed to the brands you'd find on Grafton Street. So getting off Grafton Street, using the side streets, particularly to the west of Grafton Street, is a great idea. And just walk around there if you were by yourself, just because it's lovely architecture and it's great to get lost in that area. And then, of course, we also do Dublin Castle, which is hugely important. You've got Christchurch Cathedral as well. I mentioned that earlier. And the Temple Bar area. So basically, that is kind of the main area that we covered. Obviously, the post office is on O'Connell Street, so we visit that street and the monuments on O'Connell Street. So we would do that in 3 hours if you're stuck for time.
Yep.
Now, as you can see and get a sense from me, the tours that I do are not black and white, boring history. Right? It's more of a chat. It's more of a conversation. 3 hours is too short. I don't do the 3 hour tours anymore because it's not enough time. Right. And allow you to feel everything that you should be feeling when we go into these important sites. But the 3 hour tour, if you're in a hurry, it's a great one to do. There's a break halfway through, and we go at whatever pace you want to do. And the key to experiencing Dublin properly is not to run around and take pictures, right? It's not that type of tour. It's we do the sites, we do them properly. And if we don't get to this site or that site, it doesn't matter, because what matters is you get a sense and feel for the city, right? You understand it, not just in your head, but, in your chest as well. Yeah. So that's the 3 hour tour. We have a 5 hour tour, which is the most popular one. And it is called Nearly All of Dublin in 5 hours, with nearly in brackets. And that is, most of the sites that I mentioned there, including a guided visit of the old Library of Trinity, which is the greatest library you'll ever see, unless you've been to Florence and Prague. Maybe those libraries are prettier. I don't think so, because Trinity is a huge, the old library is a huge library, and it just looks like a a movie set. It's unbelievable what you're looking at. All these old books. The youngest is 120 years old. That's the youngest book in there. Most of them are 180 years old at least. Anyway, that's a beautiful library. This library is spectacular. Your jaws just drop when you look at it. But also you've got the oldest harp in Ireland is in there. So that's an incredibly important symbol because naturally it is the symbol of Ireland. It's the national emblem. So that's wonderful to talk about that. But the highlight for the whole visit is the Book of Kells. And this is sort of like the crown jewels of Ireland. This is the most valuable treasure that Ireland still possesses. It was a manuscript, it's an illuminated manuscript created around the year 800 AD. So this is somewhat at the zenith of the golden age in Ireland, the monastic and artistic golden age. So it's the Bible, it's the New Testament written in Latin, but it has thousands of these complex and intricate illustrations throughout it that just make people believe that this was created by angels. Mm. And you'd nearly believe it yourself, even today. Smartphones in our pockets, it's still very difficult to think about how this was created by monks 1,200 years ago. So that's a big highlight of the visit. So that's the 5-hour tour. We take 2 breaks. So we take a break for coffee and then we take a break for lunch. Find that if you do a tour that is longer than an hour and a half, people need a break. A 2-hour tour, people are going to be tired at the end. Right? You'll have more energy at the end of a 5-hour tour with us than you would on a 2-hour tour with no break. People's attention and energy comes in 80 to 90 minute segments, and then you need to take a break. So we pace it accordingly, depending on whether the people want to go faster or slower. So, and then we change it up a bit depending on what people are interested in. That's the great thing, is there is a suggested itinerary, but myself and the rest of the guides, we love changing it. We love adapting it. Someone says they're interested in horses, or someone says they're interested in literature, and then we're going into the National Library and the exhibition downstairs talking about W.B. Yeats. And you could just do this very easily, because Dublin it's like London in some ways, but one way it's not like London is that you don't need to take transport to get from one side to the other. Dublin was like London in the 1800s, the start of the 1800s, really. 1700s, Dublin was the second city of the British Empire. And really the city center proper is defined by a map of Dublin from 1800 roughly. Mm-hmm. So it's all very walkable, it's all very compact. And this is why, a bus tour is the worst thing to do in Dublin, because you don't get to stand in the post office. You don't get to walk on the courtyard in Dublin Castle, and you don't get to stroll through the campus of Trinity College. You miss all that.
I think bus tours, I believe that, for me anyway, my opinion on bus tours is they're for the kind of people that want to take photographs. They're not the ones who really want to get under the skin of the destination and really understand the destination and get into the guts of the destination. They're the ones that want the photographs, they want to say they were there, and then probably they want to move on. Probably, maybe it's a good way of orientating yourself around the city, for sure, possibly at first. But I think that's the difference. There's those different types of travelers. There's the ones that want to get the picture or a selfie or whatever else, and there's the ones that want to truly understand the destination. What makes this place tick? What made this place what it is today that I'm experiencing, I guess.
That's it. You've got to, you spent the money and time and planning to come over, experience what's really here, right? Get to the substance of the city. Yeah. And, bus tours have their place, especially if you're hungover. It's very useful, which some visitors to Dublin are, because it's Dublin. It's where pubs are born. So it does have its place, and there are definitely things that you could see outside of the city centre. But most of the important sites are in the city centre, completely walkable.
Yeah. So what we're going to do now is move on to some quickfire questions, Garvan, if you're up for that. So we'll rattle through them pretty quickly. All your opinion, obviously, but best pub in Dublin and why?
Darky Kelly's
Kelly's.
a fantastic pub.
Yeah.
It is a traditional Irish music pub. It has the best staff, the atmosphere, and it's got a great mix of locals and lucky tourists that either happen upon it or who have read about it online. So it's a great place for music. They generally would have a band every night. On the weekends, they would have two. So Dark Kelly's great pub, close to Christchurch Cathedral.
Okay, perfect. In Dublin, you should always
bring an umbrella.
Bring an umbrella. Love it. Just in case. In Dublin, you should never
believe the weather forecasts.
Right, very weather related. Fair enough.
Always bring an umbrella. If it says it's going to be, it's going to be sunny today, it's a lie. It's a lie. The weather forecasts in Ireland is akin to sorcery. Right? It doesn't seem like it's a science at all. So just assume that the worst will happen, that it will rain, and at the end of the day, when you have that umbrella in hand and it's dry, right? Didn't rain. You can say, "Hey, didn't rain. Great." That's a far better way of ending the day and planning for the day than assuming things are going to be bright and shiny.
Fair play. Best place to stay in Dublin?
Obviously, it depends on your budget, but with regards to the balance between location and noise, the Westbury Hotel is just off Grafton Street on a small, quiet street with very little traffic. Staff there are fantastic as well. And Brooks Hotel, which has the same thing, where it is on a street. It's at the end of the street and it's quite quiet. But that's a couple blocks west of the Westbury Hotel. So it's in the city center as well. The Westbury's 5-star, Brooks Hotel is a 4-star boutique. They're both great. The staff are fantastic in both of them. So yeah, I'll just kind of give you two rather than naming every hotel.
Yeah, no, that's good enough. Best food in Dublin, or best eats, or?
Well, there's a place that all the locals go to. Right? It's the most local place in Dublin. And believe it or not, it's not a pub.
Right.
Right. It's a place called Kilkenny Design Store.
Okay.
On Nassau Street, Nassau, and it has on the ground floor some lovely gifts for friends and family. It's a place that you'd buy something for your mother, so you know the type of high quality. It's made in Ireland by Irish designers. But upstairs, there's a cafeteria-style eatery. And use the word cafeteria kind of with a bit of resistance, because the quality of the food is fantastic. It's amazing. So it's a great place for breakfast. Now, you have your Irish breakfast, which is basically an English breakfast. But we like to change it a little bit and say, an Irish breakfast has this or doesn't have that. Small changes, and everyone in Ireland has their own version of what makes an Irish breakfast, which somehow coincidentally is exactly what they like in the breakfast. Anyway, they make a great Irish breakfast. They don't deep fry any of the things in it. In some places you go to and they claim to have a great Irish breakfast, and you look at your black and white pudding and you can tell that they've been deep fried.
Yeah.
Or worse still, the mushrooms that just absorb all that. So Kilkenny is a place where you'll get not just tasty Irish breakfast and not just good quality meat and bacon and all that, but it's the healthiest form of an Irish breakfast.
Love
So that's
that.
Kilkenny. It's great for breakfast and lunch, and for cakes and buns and scones. It's the best scones in Dublin.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah, lovely and crumbly, and they have butter and jam and cream. Oh, it's great. So that's where all the locals, and by locals, I'm generally mean the nannies, the mammies, the grannies. That's where they go to have a chat. The best restaurant. So we have a few Michelin star restaurants, but one that's not Michelin, but the quality, the standard is up there, is called Mr. Fox.
Mr. Fox.
Mr. Fox. Yeah, just Google Mr. Fox. And it's fantastic restaurant. I kind of, I like this place. It's a barbecue place. It's called Smoking Bones. Smoking Bones. So if you want something quick, you don't want to kind of dress up fancy or anything, Smoking Bones is a great place. Kind of the best barbecue. I would say I've gone to a few barbecue places. I've been to Texas a few times as well, so I know what makes good barbecue.
Fair play.
If you want French toast, great pancakes, great American pancakes, there's a place called Herb Street. Herb Street, Herb Street. And that's one word. The best Italian place is a wonderful place called Rosa Madre. So that's Madre, Madre. And they specialize in seafood. And, lamentably, Ireland has a dearth of seafood restaurants because we export 95% of it, right? So it is great to actually go to a restaurant and have a choice of more than just salmon or cod, So that's a fantastic one. That would be the standard, and the price would be lower than Mr. Fox.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to mention any more. Just I don't want to confuse people.
That's a good enough start. In Dublin, you should definitely try what?
Butler's dark hot chocolate.
Wow. Okay.
So this is a great hot chocolate. I don't know about yourself, but you go to Belgium and Switzerland for chocolate, right? You don't go to Ireland for chocolate. But Ireland is actually the 4th biggest consumers of chocolate in the world.
Didn't know that.
We eat a lot of it. And, part of the reason why we eat so much is because we don't get summer. You don't get that good weather. So we need solace, right? We need this comfort in misery. Hence the pubs, hence the tendency to drink in the pubs, because you go inside. Right, you avoid the rain. Now, it doesn't rain half as much as we say it does in Dublin. It's actually, you're very surprised. Dublin is the driest part of Ireland. Unless you include that huge lake in Northern Ireland, the biggest lake in Ireland and Britain, Loch Ness. That lake is the driest part of Ireland. How ironic is that? A lake.
Okay.
But it rains the least there.
Yeah.
But Dublin gets very little rain. So odds are, if you're in Dublin, it's not going to be raining. Just think about it like that. They'll be afraid of the weather. The more west you go, for sure you're going to get more rain. But nothing beats the Irish countryside when we do get those sunny days.
Yeah,
the grass is so lush and the scenery is so beautiful. But anyway, back to the hot chocolate. It's the dark hot chocolate. Now, Butler's is a great Irish chain. Find it. I think you find it in Northern Ireland. Maybe you can find it in England as well. I'm not sure. But you can find it in Pakistan, and you can find it in the United Arab Emirates, because there's one thing that Ireland can export pretty well, and that's pubs. Except if you're in a Muslim country where they don't really drink alcohol, so dark hot chocolate works very well for them. Anyway, the dark hot chocolate, don't bother with the milk hot chocolate. It tastes good, but you've tasted something like that before. The dark hot chocolate is deluxe. It is rich, and you'll regret having ordered one for everybody because it's so dense and thick that you probably should have shared it.
Perfect. Most underrated thing about Dublin?
I think I've already said it, and it's you can walk everywhere.
Yeah.
That's what people don't realize. They come to Dublin and they think they need to get on a bus to see it all, but walking, I mean, the city is so compact. And I've walked, as I said, I walked through London. You walk through Paris, and you walk through New York. And if you try to walk from side to side, you're going to get a lot of filler. Let's say you're going to get a lot of filler. Dublin doesn't have that filler. It's all killer. Everything is compact. Everything is nearby. And the main reason is because Dublin thrived in the 1700s, and the 1800s were terrible, right? The 1800s, and to a lesser extent the 1900s, were very bad for Dublin. So whereas London and Paris continued to grow in the 1800s and the 1900s, Dublin didn't. And obviously economically that's terrible, but architecturally that's fantastic, because Dublin's architecture, most of it is from the 1700s, right? It's the Georgian architecture. And Queen Victoria loved coming to Dublin because it reminded her of the London of her grandfather's time.
Wow.
Dublin looked old.
Yeah.
And you can only get that from walking around. You've seen all these either neoclassical or your red brick, row houses, terraced houses, 4 stories high. You got to appreciate Dublin for that. Paris may be more beautiful. Yeah. Yes, it's more beautiful, but most of the buildings from Paris are from 1850 onwards. Right? So Dublin is older visually, and you could say there's no other city in Ireland or the UK that has as much architecture from the 18th century. Maybe Bath, but Dublin does stand out in that respect.
Very good. What should people know about Dubliners?
Well, the main thing is that there's 2 sides to Dublin. There is actually the north side and the south side. So you have the river Liffey, and it flows west to east, and it quite neatly dissects the city into your north siders. So the people from the north side of Dublin are your authentic working class, real Dubliners. So most of the taxi drivers in Dublin are from the north side. So you kind of get that accent on the north side, and the proclivity to count 1, 2, 3. Right, 3, not 3, 3.
3.
So you got that on the north side. Then on the south side, obviously people on the south side of Dublin, this is kind of more of a posh south side Dublin accent. So maybe from Foxrock or one of these kind of places where a lot of the schools are private. You might hear an accent like this if you watch rugby, because most of the people, rugby is more of a south side game, whereas soccer is more of a north side game. But people play rugby generally from these private colleges that emphasize rugby. So there you have kind of your south side accent and your north side accent. And the north side, more working class, south side, wealthier. Most of the city is actually on the south side.
Yeah.
But the north side has, you could argue, a bit more character, a bit more adventure there.
So who would you rather spend time with in the pub? A group of Northsiders or a group of Southsiders?
Well, both. You want to have both of them there at the pub at the same time. And watch the show.
So listen, Garvan, we're running low on time. So I just want to, really thank you so much for being so generous with your time and for talking us through Dublin as you know it. And I guess finally, we'd like to know really if there's anybody out there that wants to know more about Dublin and wants, importantly, to learn more about Dublin and the tours that you do, where should we direct them? You've got your website, which is dublintourguide.ie?
Correct. Yep.
And that's the best place to direct them, yeah?
For sure. Yeah, we're obviously on practically all the social media. You just search Dublin Tour Guide. Somebody beat me on Twitter, so it's just Tour Guide Dublin on Twitter.
I know the
But if
feeling.
you Google Dublin Tour Guide, you'll see us popping up there on the right, the Google listing. Go check out the website and take a look at the reviews on TripAdvisor. That would be a big one. That's how most people find us, because it's not what we say about our services that convinces people, it's what other people say. So we have nearly 500 5-star reviews on TripAdvisor. We have about 507 reviews in total. So the whole objective, the whole goal of the company is to give people the best tour they'll ever have. That's what we aim at with every tour. So we've got the walk-in tours. We've got a pub crawl as well to explore, of course, the great pub culture of Dublin and Ireland. And then for people who are coming over in a medium to big size group, you generally have individuals who want to see a lot of sites and do a whole touristy stuff, and others that just want to relax and be on holidays and have a drink. So we have a tour just for that group, and it's called Sights and Pints.
Sights and Pints, love it. I'd be very tempted to come on over at some point and do the pub crawl with you, Garvan.
You're getting thirsty, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. And if we do it, what we should do is maybe we will record a podcast as we're doing the pub crawl, and that'd be great to give people a little bit of a sample as to what it's like, and we just record it live there while we're drinking and having fun.
That's a great idea.
All about it. So I think that could be one we can do this winter during the low season as well. Hey,
that's a great excuse to do it. Yes.
Awesome. Garvan, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you and learning a lot about Dublin. And wish you all the very best for the coming low season.
Thanks very much, Jed. Thanks for inviting me to have a chat with you. I very much enjoyed talking with you. And hopefully I'll see you in Dublin soon.
Absolutely.
So thanks again to Garvan for sharing his experience with us. And I hope this has inspired many of you to take a walking tour of Dublin to learn more about the hidden gems which are often overlooked. Thanks again for your company this week. And if there are any destinations, topics or guests you think we should feature on this series, then please do drop me a line at jed@lowseasontraveller.com. And if you're enjoying the podcasts, I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to leave a review on iTunes and share the podcast with your friends, family and social networks. We're the world's first organisation entirely dedicated to only promoting travel during the low seasons in each destination as a means of alleviating the growing burden of over-tourism. And that's why our content will always be free for everyone, as we believe that travel is better without the crowds.